What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, BJ Dell, and today is video 1 in a new series of 26 videos where I use the iPad and Procreate to illustrate the entire alphabet. Every single letter, A through Z, as an animal that starts with that letter. Today's video is A for alligator, but here's where you guys come in. Obviously 25 more letters, and there's a lot of different options for each letter. B, for example, could be bear or bird or bumblebee. So let me know down in the comments, what do you guys want to see going forward? Give me suggestions and you might see yours show up in one of the upcoming videos. Today though, it's all about the alligator, so let's go ahead and jump into it. Right guys, so let's go ahead and start and draw this alligator A. So beginning out, I'm using a 4000 by 4000 pixel 300 DPI canvas. It's an RGB canvas. For my brush today, I'm going to be using my new creator set for Procreate. We're going to start out using the Brainstorm sketch brush. And for my color palette, once again, I've got this pre-made. So if you want to download the exact same colors that I'm using in today's tutorial, you can get that for free on my website. If you go to bjdell.com, underneath the YouTube reference materials page, you'll find a link to that, along with the video at the top that kind of walks you through how to download. So let's go ahead and get started. To begin with, we'll start sketching with the black color right here using that Brainstorm sketch. But before we do that, I kind of want to have a basis for the letter. So we're going to add some text here and just put the letter in there. So let's go to add text and we'll choose A. And then I'm going to go ahead and with that selected, we'll highlight that, double tapping, and then I'm going to change the font here. So we'll select that and let's just use Arial. That's what I'm going to use for this whole video series. And then for style, we're going to go ahead and choose bold. So we've got a nice bold letter to work with. Grabbing the arrow then with uniform selected, we're going to go ahead and just make this really big. I want to kind of fill up the whole canvas here. Give us a good jumping off point. Get it centered there. I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to grab that arrow again and turn on the snapping and magnetic just to make sure we're where we need to be here. All right, there we go. Okay, with that done then, what we're going to do is we're going to come up here to our layers menu. I'm going to tap on the A and we're going to go ahead and rasterize this. So that way we can make some changes. The crossbar here on the A, I kind of want to move that up a little bit. So grabbing my eraser then, we're just going to select that smooth anchor right here. And I'm just going to erase that out. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Like I said, this is just kind of to help us out with our sketch. So, all right. With that done then, I'm going to switch back to the brush here, and so we'll just move that up and holding down with the Apple Pencil to connect it or to make a straight line, and then go ahead and fill in here. Drag and drops, filling in everything, so I just need to pull down the color drop threshold up here. So we've got it in there then. I think I might make it a little bit bigger down here at the bottom. All right, looks pretty good. Like I said, it's not perfect, but that's okay. Just using it as a basis for the sketch. So now that we've got that done, we're coming back up to the layers and I'm gonna drop the opacity, hitting that N for blend mode and bringing this down to about 25, 26%. I want to be able to see it as a guide, but don't want it to be too dark. We can actually go even further down than that, I think. Maybe down to an 8%. Looks pretty good. All right. So now I'm going to drag this down to the bottom here. So we've got layer 1 on top of the layer A, and we're going to select layer 1. We'll use that as our sketch layer. And then coming back to the brush library, we're still using that Brainstorm sketch brush. And then I'm just going to start to kind of work in the shape that I want. I think down here at the bottom, this is all going to be pretty straight as far as the lines go. I'll have the eyes here kind of coming down to the nose, and this will be the under part of the chin here, the lower jaw in the back. Now I'm going to start to twist so we can kind of visualize this a little bit better. And this is where I'm going to start to actually sketch in here. So we'll kind of pull the head around. We'll have the eyes kind of in this area here. So I'll start to sketch those in here. We got our left eye. We'll kind of bring this around here. Have that brow come over top. Like that. Have the other eye here, off to this side. Again with another brow coming around here. And that'll kind of lead here into the snout. Kind of want this to curve down here in the front. We'll start to pull in the nostrils here on the top. Now, with the perspective here, this nostril is going to be on the front side here of this curve, and then the back one will be on the back. So this one overlaps in the front, and this one gets cut off here by that curve. Just kind of darkening here as I go. And once again, this is just the sketch stage, so this is supposed to be pretty loose. Continue this up here. Pull in some kind of creases here under his eyes. And then I want this eye to kind of be hidden behind, so grabbing the eraser then, I'm going to erase here. It's the way that snout comes up there. I'll probably pull this eye up just a little bit further now. All right, I think that looks pretty good. We'll get our pupils in here, kind of give them a cross-eyed goofy look here. And the iris, we'll pull that around. Once again, just really sketchy here. Getting the basic ideas in. All right, looks good. Do a crease here where the mouth meets. Another crease here in the back. And then we'll connect this line down. All right. And I think I'm going to grab this and move it back just a little bit more. So going to the A, using the selection tool and freehand selected, just going to lasso this, and then using the arrow, kind of pull it back just a tad bit. I think that looks a little bit better. What I envision this to be is kind of like some drool coming down. So moving back here to our sketch layer, we can start pulling that drool. We'll kind of have it stringing down so it's not just one big piece there. And just like that. And then from here we can do some teeth. So I'm just going to kind of use some triangles to block these in. And then we'll add a little bit more kind of detail to these here in a second. So just some basic triangles to get the shape down. And then using the curve here and kind of curving more to a rounded point in the front. Just like that. Do the same thing here on the bottom row, kind of having that overlap there in the front. And that curve with kind of that soft tip. I don't want it too spiky. If you go too spiky with the cartoons, then you lose kind of some of that cuteness or the cartoon quality to it. All right. And all in all, I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to flip it back around so we can see what it looks like from the perspective that we're going to view it at. And I think that's good. So we'll turn it back around one more time. And then from here, we can go ahead and start the inking process. So let's work on that next. So to begin the inking process, I'm going to come up here to layers. First off, I'm going to turn off the A. We don't need to see that anymore. Then I'm going to make a new layer on top of the sketch layer. And just like we did with the A, we're going to go ahead, hit the N for blend mode. We're going to drag down the opacity to about 20%. It's pretty good. Once again, we want to be able to see it. We just don't want it to be too dark. Back to my sketch here. I think I am going to add in some drips coming down off the teeth so it kind of matches up with the slime ooze there on that one. And then we can even maybe pull some around here on the front. Won't go too crazy with it. All right, there we go. So now with the new layer made, this is going to be our inks layer. We're going to go ahead and select that one. Back to the brush library then, I'm going to use the smooth inker to ink this. And we're still using that black. And then I'll kind of just jump in. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer here so we can see better. And I think I'll bring this line around first. That'll be the first inking part. And you'll see I'm going to start outside here. It gives me better control over the angle and the pressure that I need. And it kind of starts the overall line there ahead of time. So I have a little bit more control, and I'll do it a few times just to kind of get in the flow. And you'll see too, I overlapped here just because I'm going to come back in and kind of clean that up. Same thing here, cleaning it up there. All right. Now that I've got that, I'm going to start working on these other lines. So again, bringing my line here, holding down to lock it into the shape that I want. Gives it that nice solid line there. And then this one I'm going to spin the canvas so I've got a little bit better control over the way my arm moves for that. You can see once again overlapped here because I'm just going to erase to clean it up. This one's a little bit more difficult just because you got to make sure that line lines up here and it doesn't get all crazy. This is a perfect example when you could use another layer. I've shown that a lot in my previous videos where I'll use multiple layers if I'm erasing. That way I don't run into problems like that. So you can also use that technique as well if you need to have more control over that eraser part. Just continue this process around and using the eraser to remove our overlaps. Same thing down here. See there, I've got a kind of chunky spot there that I can fix. We'll just go back in over here on the top to fix that. All right, pulling back out, you can kind of see what we have there. We've got to come up here, do the fixings up here. So again, just making sure these all line up. And I will come in here and fix this line weight too so it matches up a little bit better with this back part here. I want and kind of pull the line back a little bit as far as the size, and then once I get down to that part, then it doesn't really match the thickness. I want that to be about the same, so that makes it line up a little bit better there. You can see what we've got. All right, for the rest of it then, I'm gonna just flip this way. I think we're pretty much done with using that perspective. We'll just keep it turned right now. Not perspective, more orientation, I guess you would say. Of course, here I'm just trying to match up these lines. This is another great area where you could use multiple layers. So if you overlap too much, you could just go in and erase. And here I'm just erasing to get a little bit better of a taper on that line. Do the same thing here, just a little bit sharper there on the edge. That's the thing, I like using sharp lines and edges like that when it comes to the tapers, but for the main lines here, for the sharpness of an actual characteristic. I don't like to use too many sharp lines like that on a cartoon. Again, taper is on the end here. And with the taper, basically it's something you just got to become accustomed to. Starts out with a light press if you're starting with a taper, and then you get heavier with the press as you go around. This one's going to be a kind of big movement. I'm going to start here, pull it down and back. One more time. Just like that. All right. Get the eyes in here. We'll just drag and drop. Same thing on this side. Eye in there and drag and drop. And our iris coming around on both sides. Just holding down to kind of lock it in. From here then I'm going to grab the eraser and just erase some highlights here on those pupils. And just like that. Pull them back out, you can kind of see what we've got there. Back to my brush. Go ahead and bring these bags here under the eyes around. Same thing back here. I'm going to pull this one forward just a little bit. Some nice taper lines around there as well. Back to my eraser just to clean them up a tad bit. All right, pull them back out. You can kind of see what we've got. Let's keep on going here. We'll get this drool in the center of the mouth. I love doing stuff like this where it's got that drip quality to it. It's really fun when you get those nice tapered curves and you can just make it look really neat. All right. Probably put some tapered lines too just to show some dripping motion there on top of what we've already got. And then over here to the teeth. Went a little too far up with that one. Get these drips in here. Just like that. Continuing down here to the bottom. Then we'll have these kind of coming over top, so we've got to erase that overlap there. Try that one more time, pulling it like this. There we go. This one as well. Get that tooth around there. Try that one more time. And then the last one. All right, I'm not going to put the drip on that one. I think it might just be overkill there. So pulling back out, then you can kind of see what we're left with. That is our final inked version of our design. From here then we're ready to move on and add the color flats. So to do the color flats, what we're going to do is we're going to come up here to our layers menu. I'm going to turn off our sketch layer now, so we're left with just the inks. And then I'm going to add a new layer underneath the inks. So we have a layer 4 now. With that done, layer 3, I'm going to come back up here. I'm going to set this as reference. So this is going to allow us to drag and drop our colors onto layer 4. And it's only going to show up in the areas like that we have selected up here with the inks. So it kind of works like a coloring book, just a quick little way to color in. So coming back up to our colors palette then, we've got the green here. That's going to be our first color. Drag and drop, and then I'll hit continue filling up here. So that way we can just tap to color in everything. So we've got that done. I'm going to turn off the background color now so we can see that, yes, we do need to fill in the eyes and the teeth. But before we do that, I'm going to come down underneath the green layer. I'm going to make another new layer. So each individual part of the design with the colors, I'm going to split this up, which is going to make adding in our shadows and highlights a lot easier later on. So with that done, let's grab our color palette again. We've got this light blue color here. Let's go ahead and use that for the drips. So we'll go ahead and do that one there. I think the other drips, I'll do those on a separate layer as well. So making a new layer again. And we'll put all these on a separate layer. Okay. Back to our layers menu. I'm going to make another new layer. Back to our color palette. We've got the white here. So we'll use that and drag and drop in for the eyes. And actually, I'm going to put the eyes on separate layers. So we've got one layer for that one. Making a new layer here. Drag and drop a new layer for that one. Making another new layer again here. We'll drag and drop for the teeth, hitting continue filling here. And we'll get all the teeth in there. I think with that layer, I'm going to use that to also do those little parts inside the eye, those reflections right there. And then finally, I'm going to make another new layer here. Back to my color palette, choosing that blue color. And we'll use that for the irises. Pulling back out, you can see what we're left with. And really quick, really easy. Adding in colors like this using the reference layer and the drag and drop makes coloring a breeze. And having these split up, like I said, it's going to help us in the next section, which is adding the shadows and the highlights. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so for the shadows and the highlights, we're going to come up here to our layers menu, and we'll start with the body or the head of the alligator. So with that layer selected, I'm going to make a new layer on top. I'm going to tap this and I'm going to set this as clipping mask. So what this does is clipping mask allows us to color in on this layer, and it only shows up on the parts that are colored in on that green. So we don't have to worry about going out of the lines. We don't have to worry about coloring over top of our whites or any other thing on here. Makes it really nice. I'm also going to turn on our background again, just so we've got that white back there. All right, with that done and that selected, then we're going to come back up to the colors palette. And we'll begin here. I've got this kind of brighter yellowish green color. We'll use that to start out with our highlights. And then coming up to the brush library, I'm going to switch over to my soft rendering brush. Now with this, I've already got the opacity set at 32%. It's got a really nice slow buildup. It gives you a ton of control. And for the size, I'm using the middle one here, which is set at 15%. I'll probably hop back and forth between these though, so just be prepared to change the size. All right, with that done then, soft rendering selected, we're gonna come up and start to hit here on the top of that snout. We'll start to build up this, and then kind of letting up pressure as we come down. Make it a tad bit bigger here. And letting up pressure. Now I'm going to switch over to my eraser and just erase that overlap that I had right here. So I want to keep that just on there. And then back to my brush, we'll hit the tops here of this nostril and hit the top of this one. Actually, let's wait on doing the top of that one. Let's pull that back out just because I want to hit the top of this, and it's going to go over the edge there, so I'm going to have to do some erasing. So we'll do that first and then use my eraser to come back in here. Like this. And then I'm going to switch this eraser over to that soft rendering, because you see we're starting to get a line here. So if I erase with the same brush, we can get that same kind of gradient to it. And then back to the brush, we'll hit the top of this one. And you can see I'm all the way outside of where I'm coloring in, but that's the great thing with, number one, how this brush works. Number two, with how clipping mask works, is you can go way outside and have a lot of control over what you're getting. All right, we'll start up here then on these. Just hitting the edges there, and I'm going to pull that back with the eraser just a little bit as well. Come back in and build it up a little bit more. All right, just like that. Dropping the size down now. I'm going to come down here and hit around there, and we'll also get around this part of the eye crease. All right, looks good. Making this a tad bit bigger. I'm going to start to pull in from here, just across the top there. All right, that looks good. Now we're going to come back up here to our color palette. We're going to choose that darker green color, and coming back in here, I'm going to make another new layer. On top of this one, you'll see, since this one is set to clipping mask, this one automatically sets itself to clipping mask as well. And with that done then, I'm just going to start to pull in from the bottom here. You see this really builds up nice and slow. Just continue this around the back here. And underneath that eye. And now coming in here with the eraser then, I'm just going to pull that up just a little bit. Going in closer here to the top. And you can see I've got some overlap of that yellow coming down. So if I grab that layer then, and with my eraser making it a little bit smaller, I can pull that yellow from coming down into that darker green. That's one of the benefits too of using two layers like this. All right, back to the darker green then. Still using that same brush. Start to pull in darker area down here, kind of fade it up. Just like that. And then we'll get here around the eyes, that bottom part, and then back here. Once again, using the eraser then to come in and kind of clean up the overlaps. All right, looks good. Back to our brush, we'll continue here inside that nostril, then a little bit here on that back side. I'm just going to fade this up a little bit more. All right, we're good. So that's going to be it for the green sections there for right now. Let's come back up to the layers menu, and we'll go to this layer 7, which is the eye over here. We're going to make a new layer, and we'll tap this and set this as clipping mask as well. So layer 7, new layer on top, set to clipping mask. Back to the color palette, and let's go ahead and use, let's see, that blue that we used for the drool there, we'll start to do the shading in the eyes with that. So with that selected, still using that soft rendering brush, we're just going to come around the edges of the eyes here and kind of start to give that kind of that 3D effect. With that done then, we can come back here to the color palette. I've got a darker blue here on the third or the second row, third one in. And this will just use, add a little bit more change in value there, and it really helps to kind of drive home that 3D effect we're going for. All right, same thing here on the back one. New layer on top of there. tapping it and setting it as clipping mask. Use that same blue here. Build that up for that 3D effect, and then back to the color palette for the darker. And pulling that around as well. If you get too dark here or have it filled in too much, you can once again just use that eraser to start to pull it back, and you have a little bit more control. Okay, let's go ahead and do the irises now. So layer 10, we'll have that selected. New layer on top, tapping it, setting it to clipping mask. And we'll continue using that same dark blue color that we just got done using. Switching back to our brush, and I'm going to use the smaller setting for this, about the 7%. I'll zoom in here a little bit better so you can see. We'll just pull in some darker areas around the bottom and the sides, just so it's not that, you know, solid blue coming in there. We want it to have a little bit of change. And then we'll come back up here and select white and kind of hit in some white areas too. All right, pull them back out. You can see what we're left with. I think that looks good. Next up then, back up here to our layers menu. Let's go to the teeth layer, layer 9. Select that, make a new layer. Tap it. Clipping mask, once again, you guessed it. We're going to come back up to our color palette, and we're going to do the same thing that we did with the eyes here. We're going to use that first color, making the size that middle one here. Pulling that shadow that the mouth is giving off there, and then kind of bring it back down that backside. Do the same thing here. Around that backside. A little bit there in the front, and then back to the color palette and choosing that darker blue again, just to reinforce. Add a little bit more change there to bring out that three-dimensional quality. All right, that looks good. Next up, we'll do the drool. So back up to our layers menu. We'll do this first drool here. A new layer. And the reason I did these on separate ones is just because I can be a little bit more broader with my strokes, and I'm not going to hit this area when I'm working on these. Likewise, I'm not going to hit these when I'm working on this. So that's why, if you want these all under one layer, by all means, feel free. That's the way I did the eyes too, for that same reason. All right, with that selected then, this one, obviously, we're just going to use the darker blue because the blue that we used here on the teeth was actually that same blue that we used for this drool. So I'm not going to have as much of a value change here. We'll just get some shadows, and then I think with this one we'll use more of the white to make it pop here. So with that done, we can select white. Hit some highlights here. I'm going to drop this down even further now. I got even more control over the size of this. Kind of hit here in the front of these. Just give some highlights to that coming down. Okay. Now we can move on to this back part. So back to our layers menu, layer 5, a new layer on top, tapping that, setting it as clipping mask. Back to our color palette and that darker blue again. Still using that soft rendering brush. And I'm going to go for that middle setting. Bring that around that top and then down the back here. I'm going to make it smaller then. We'll start to kind of follow the lines that we've got. That was a little too dark. Then back up to our color palette and selecting white. Dropping the size again. This is just where we're adding those highlights to make it look three-dimensional. All right, pulling back out then, you can kind of see what we've got there. All right, so almost done here. We're just gonna kind of go in and fine tune and add just a little bit more to make what we've already laid out here come to life. So I wanna go to, let's go to layer 12 first. I wanna see if this is, nope, layer 11 actually. I need to kind of fine tune this a little bit more. It's coming a little bit too far off here in the back and not far enough up. Of course, I've got the size way too low there. I just want this to blend a little bit better. All right. Okay. So now for the body itself, we're going to go to this layer 11. I'm going to make a new layer here. We'll tap this and set this as clipping mask as well. So this is going to be on top of all the head green colors here. I've got this darker green here. I'm going to select that. And then for my brush, I'm going to go to the fine grain brush. And I'll have to toy around here with the size. I think that is pretty close. So with this, I'll have this set at about 33% for the size. And I'm just going to come in and darken a little bit of what we did. And it's going to give a little bit of a texture to it as well. So I'm going really light now, barely touching the screen. Dropping the size down here as I come in underneath. I'm going really light right now. Also going to go a little bit heavier here in the nostril because this is where we're going to make this filled in and look darker. Once I've got that, I can go ahead and erase the overlaps there. I've got a little funky area there. I think, yeah, that's being caused by that yellow, so I can just come in there and erase. That was kind of bothering me a little bit. All right, with that done then, still using that same darker section here, we're going to make actually a new layer on top of that, set this to clipping mask as well, and then coming back up to the color palette, we've got this brighter yellow here. I'm going to use that same fine grain brush and just kind of bring out some of those highlights here with that brush. Once again, just getting the feel for how big I need it. I think that's pretty good. Once again, 20% on there. Just kind of brings home some of those colors that we just did. All right, just like that. A little bit here. Finally here, I think with these coming down, I want to bring in a little bit of a shadow there. So if we go with our darker green that we used here for the shadows, and we can go back to that layer 12, that was our darker green color. I'm going to use that soft rendering brush and just kind of pull in some shadows here. Where these come in. Just so they don't look like they're floating right there. I'll have to pull a little bit of this yellow away just so that shows up a little bit more too. All right. I think that looks pretty good. And from here, I'd just like to add in little details, stuff that finishes out the design. So if I go to layer 3, which is our inks layer, and choose black again, and that smooth inker, you can just put some extra little lines around to add in some details. tad bit smaller here. Just little lines like that. I wouldn't overdo this section, but if you want to do some like cross hatching, things like that, just to add in a little bit more, you can. I think the teeth could also use that as well. So if we pull in some, pull in some tapered lines here for the teeth, that'll add in a little bit more. And maybe just a few more here. Now that we have the colors in there and the shadows, we can kind of use those to decide where those go. Pull some more around here on these teeth. And since this one doesn't have any coming off, maybe doing some cross hatching here might look kind of cool. And just like that. All right, what else? Maybe a couple in here. Some tapered lines. And then maybe even some dots or some spots on him. If we decide what layer we want to use here. We'll probably do it on that darker green layer. And choosing that yellow again with, let's go with the soft rendering and see how that works. Just pulling some dots here. I don't know if those are maybe too blurry. If we should use the color blocking brush instead so they've got a little bit more. I think that's going to be too dark though. Let's make a new layer and do these. Just kind of haphazard here, just throwing these kind of wherever. Throw some here around the front. I think that's pretty good. All right, from here then I'm going to drop the opacity of these. Don't want them to be too dark. And then I'm also going to play with where I want to put them. I think underneath that darker green looks good. Because that's the thing, obviously, with the shadows that we've got, we don't want them all to be the same look, the same value, because they're going to be darker down here with the shadows. So if you put them under that green and then turn the opacity back up so we can still see these up here, I think that's probably the best solution there. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Finally then, I'm going to play with this yellow here in the back just a little bit. Is it the yellow or the green? Maybe a combination of the two here. Because I don't want this coming too far back here. So tried to erase that earlier and didn't catch all of it. And then once I added that other green on there, it became pretty apparent there. All right. Then that's what we're left with. Finally then, I'm just going to make a new layer. Get my smooth inker out here. I'm going to sign this guy and we will be done with today's tutorial. So there we go. The letter A for alligator, the first in my series of doing the entire alphabet A through Z with animal themes. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. There's going to be B through Z coming up. So definitely make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell for notifications so you can get alerts when I post more of these in the series. If you guys do follow along with any of my tutorials, if you make a drawing based on one of them, I definitely want you to share it online. So if you're on Instagram or Twitter or TikTok, post it there and tag me at BJDell so I can check it out. I love to see what you guys come up with. Love seeing you follow along. So thanks so much. As for me, I can also be found online, bjdell.com. And that is it for today's video. Until next time, keep creating.